Welcome to another episode of Cooking on Caffeine. My name is Megan and I am your host. And today we are going to do some science. If you are new here, my channel and my blog are all about inclusion at the table. I strive to make foods with ingredients that are safe for people so that they can have the things that they used to enjoy again or experience things that they've never been able to have before. That is my main passion, but my other passion is science, and that is what we are doing today, a combination of my two loves. We are going to be using a technique of molecular gastronomy, which is just like crazy kitchen science, to make our egg yolk. The technique that I'm going to be using specifically is called reverse spherification. Reverse spherification. Anyway, there's a regular and there's a reverse spherification. We're going to be doing reverse spherification today. Now, I ordered my kit on Amazon, and it's from the company Modernist Pantry. If you've done any kind of crazy vegan mad science in your kitchen before, you have probably heard of this company. They sell lots of things like agar and carrageenan, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that one, as well as different gums and things that you don't find in your regular grocery store, to make things like cheese and seitan and whatever, mad science in the vegan kitchen. So it's Modernist Pantry, and this is a reverse spherification kit. Now this kit came with some quick instructions and recipes, and then they also have a link to a spherification course that they have on their website that comes in. This is pretty handy. It came with this little spherification mold. It is a silicone mold, and these little divots are 1 inch across. These are perfect size for my egg yolk, but you can reverse spherify pretty much any liquid that you can imagine. Yogurts, alcoholic cocktails, milk, sauces. If you want to get really fancy and do like a tomato-based sauce with like the pasta on the side and pretend that you're like a 5-star Michelin chef, this is what you need for that. And then you have the two chemicals that we're going to be working with. Now, when I say chemicals, please, guys, please don't freak out, okay? Everything in life is a chemical, including one of the ingredients we're going to be working with today, which is water, okay? Dihydrogen monoxide. Just because it's got a chemically sounding name, it is a chemical. It doesn't mean that it is scary. Please learn about your ingredients. Learn what they are before you decide to be scared and run away from stuff and yell that the end is coming because we're using chemicals, okay? So dihydrogen monoxide, distilled water, over here. We want to make sure that we use distilled water because if there are any minerals in it, especially calcium, it's going to react with this batch, and it can cause some problems in your spherification. So make sure that you use distilled water. I just went and grabbed mine from the pharmacy that's on the corner. Then we've got calcium lactate. I know lactate makes it sound like it's dairy. It's not dairy, okay? Don't worry. These are all plant-based, vegan, this is gluten-free, non-GMO, kosher, all that goodness, okay? So this is calcium lactate. It is just a mineral, okay? It is calcium in a form that is not harmful to the human body. We need to add calcium to whatever the thing is that we are going to be spherifying. In this case, I'm going to be using just egg for my egg yolk because it cooks up just like a chicken egg does. So I'm going to be able to make an omelet out of this. I'm going to make yolks out of just egg. So I'm going to be mixing my calcium lactate into my just egg so that we can have our cool chemical reaction. Then we've got our sodium alginate. Sodium, it's like a salt, right? Alginate, it came from algae. Okay, guys? It's not scary. This is also vegan, gluten-free, non-GMO, and kosher. Okay? So don't be scared of this. Plant-based, not scary chemical. Okay, guys? This is what we are going to be mixing with our dihydrogen monoxide, our distilled water over here. And what happens is when the sodium alginate comes into contact with calcium, it's going to form a membrane or a skin around our egg yolk to keep everything contained. So we're going to mix, again, sodium alginate with our water, calcium lactate with our just egg. When we put the just egg that has the calcium in it into our bath of sodium alginate, it's going to form a membrane or a skin, a very thin skin around the just egg, and it's going to give us a very realistic egg yolk. It's not scary. It's pretty simple. It's science, which is awesome. Don't be scared. Okay? You have to promise me. Pinky promise. Don't be scared. Chemicals, not scary. Now, some other things you're going to need in order to do this is a scale. We are not going to be able to measure these in teaspoons, tablespoons, all of that nonsense. We have to use weight, and the easiest weight to use is going to be grams. So make sure that you have a scale that measures to the gram, okay? Very important. And make sure that the batteries in it are alive, because the last shoot I tried to do, my batteries were dead and I had to go get more. We are going to need a blender. You don't need a high-powered blender for this. We're not going to be blending something like into a smoothie or a cheese or anything like that. We are just going to need the blender to mix our powders into our liquids. Okay? A stick blender, whether it's a stand blender, whether it's a cheap $5 blender from the store, as long as it blends. And we're blending on low, so it doesn't need to be high-powered or any of that. We also need a bowl. Okay? Now we are going to use the bowl for our sodium alginate mixture. We're going to blend it, and we're going to pour it into the bowl, and then we have to let it set for at least an hour before we can dip our egg yolks in it. And that's just to let all the bubbles that are in it dissipate. I mean, you come to the top, pop, go away. So we have a nice, clean, homogeneous bath. And you can use saran wrap, tin foil, a lid. I don't have a lid for this bowl. I don't want to use saran wrap, so I just got a cool plate, like my cake plate, to put on the top so that it can rest in the fridge and it won't get contaminated in there. Other than that, that's all we need to get started. So let's go. Pop open my blender here. Now, like I said, these chemicals are not harmful, okay? So I don't want you to be scared. I have measured out here 1 liter of my distilled water, and I'm going to add it into my blender. One liter, or 1,000 milliliters of distilled water in my blender. Now I need to measure out, I wrote the instructions on the front of my bags here, 5 to 7 grams of my sodium alginate per liter of distilled water, okay? Just don't breathe it in. I don't think it'll hurt you, but I don't think it's a good idea to breathe this stuff in. So it's a white powder. You're going to add between 5 and 7 grams to our blender. Now, to do that, I'm going to set a small bowl on my scale, and then I'm going to turn it on. That way it's going to come out to 0, which is tare, which it has accounted for the weight of my bowl. Should return to 0 when I put the bowl back on there. And now I'm going to measure out 5 to 7 grams of my sodium alginate. So it's 5 grams of our sodium alginate, and we are ready to add it into our water bath. I'm going to put the lid on. Just set it on there. We are going to mix this with our water on low in our blender for 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes, we're going to put it in our glass bowl, put the lid on it, and put it in the fridge for at least 1 hour. Now I am going to start the blender with the lid on. On low speed. And I can take the lid off because I know it's not going to splatter everywhere. I'm going to slowly pour in my sodium alginate as it's mixing. And we are going to let this go for 5 minutes. Turn this off now. And you can see that it has thickened up substantially here, but it does have a lot of bubbles. That is why we need to pour it into our bowl and let it sit for at least an hour. Otherwise, what's going to happen is we're going to get lots of bubbles in the membrane around our egg yolk, and it won't look very realistic that way. So I'm going to pour this into my bowl. And then I'm immediately going to put this to wash it out in the sink. Okay, now we've got our sodium alginate all mixed up and ready. I'm going to put my lid on it and put it in the fridge. We'll see it again in an hour. Okay, so now that we have our sodium alginate bath resting in the refrigerator for at least an hour, we need to move on to making our egg yolks. The reason we need to get started on this is because I'm going to freeze them in this little mold, and I want it to be frozen before we put it in the bath, and we need time for it to freeze so we can all do it at the same time, right? So what we need to do is we need to mix our calcium lactate with our just egg. And it's a white powder, as you can see, just like our sodium alginate was. It looks exactly the same. And again, vegan, kosher, plant-based, non-GMO, all that stuff. Don't be scared. Pinky promise. We're gonna do some math here. Into my handy dandy little measuring cup here. Let me turn it on. With this on here, again, just like we did with the bowl earlier, so that we have a 0 when we turn this on. And then we can add in our just egg. Now we need to add in our calcium lactate. So let me 0 this off. And we are going to go back to grams, back to weight. And I'm going to add in my calcium lactate. There we go. And now we need to mix this for 1 to 2 minutes, just until everything is completely incorporated. Okay, And something I'm noticing with the Just Egg, when I think about a chicken egg, it's a little bit more yellow than this, and like a farm fresh chicken egg has a little bit more orange. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of food coloring. I'm just gonna add a drop of our yellow and mix it in and see what color we get. I'm gonna add a little bit of red to bring up the orange. Okay, so my next step, now that I have the color right and I have it mixed with the calcium lactate, is I'm going to pour it into my silicone mold, and I don't want it to bend in the freezer. So I'm gonna put it on a little baking tray here, just like that. So I'm gonna pour it into each cavity in my mold. All right, so I've got all of the cavities filled in my mold right now. As you can see, I didn't even use half of my Just eggs, so I'll have plenty of omelets without making eggs. But as you can see here, I have a lot of bubbles in my yolks. So I'm gonna let them sit for just a few minutes out on the counter before I pop them in the freezer, because I don't want my egg yolks to be full of bubbles. So in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and put a top on the leftover Just egg, and what's left in the bottle, put them back in the refrigerator, and then I'm gonna come and check and see how many bubbles are left in this before we pop it in the freezer. Okay, this has been resting for about 30 minutes now. It still has a few bubbles in it. I tried vibrating the tray. I tried doing like macarons and pounding it on the table. And we still have some bubbles in there, but I don't have a whole lot of time before the kids come home from school. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop it in the freezer and work with what we've got. I'll be right back. These are frozen solid, so I'm gonna pop one out. I'm gonna grab it and drop it immediately into my sodium alginate bath. Start out with one. I already had 2 tests that I did to make sure that it was working, so I didn't waste the whole batch. Get my slotted spoon, and I'm going to gently stir, drizzle my sodium alginate over the yolks to make sure that they are completely covered, so that that chemical reaction can take place with the calcium ions, which forms the membrane around them. And we're just gonna let this sit for 1 to 3 minutes, okay? It will differ depending on the temperature of the bath, the temperature of your yolks, and the concentrations of the chemicals that you have in there. So we're just gonna let that sit for between 1 and 3 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna put this back into the freezer so that they can stay frozen. All right, and after a couple of minutes, I'm gonna give it a little stir to see, and yes, they are ready to go. Scoop up one at a time with your slotted spoon. Drain off as much of that alginate as you can. Gently swiping back and forth with the spoon, and drop it into our water. This can be tap water. I thought it had to be distilled, but it doesn't. So we're in our tap water, rinsing all of the alginate off of the yolk. And then I scoop it up and put it into a clean plate. I like to use plates that don't have ridges because it makes it easier to slide the yolks off later. And we'll slide it right off onto the plate. And there we have a vegan egg yolk, you guys. I'm so excited. Let me finish up doing all of my yolks, and then we are going to get to work filling our eggshells with our vegan egg white that I have here, our yolks, and hopefully being able to glue them together, putting a shell on, cracking them open, separating them, and cooking with the whites and the yolks. Fingers crossed.